Part 203. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2021. The emperor's mood didn't get better until the new year, perhaps because he was in a bad mood. In the past 4 months or so, he has been a little lazy, and has left many political affairs to the prince. The entire royal family is keeping filial piety, and the prince has nothing else to do. He suddenly received so much work, except for being irritable for a while due to the busyness at the beginning, and then he slowly got used to it. Not only the emperor, but even the courtiers became more and more satisfied with the prince. Upon seeing this, the queen finally asked the emperor to let King Gong return to the fief after the new year. Prince Gong's injury has healed, but his legs are still a little lame, and he can't see it when he walks slowly, but he can see it as long as he moves a little faster. After the board was removed, King Gong cried for 2 days, because the emperor broke his leg, and he suffered for a while. For this reason, Man Bao had to give him 2 more days of medicine. Because the officials are still in the state mourning period, so few people gather for a feast even during the Chinese New Year. Even if they do, they are quietly afraid to let outsiders know. Anyway, Zhou Man and the other 3 are very low-key, because during the Chinese New Year, Bai Dalan also moved to Zhou's house, and the 3 brothers studied together. Man Bao also came back from vacation in the Imperial College Hospital, and is studying the medical books sent by the Queen Mother, and the Imperial College Medical Office will meet after the spring. Very busy. The Taiyuan Hospital has decided to recruit 12 students, led by Zheng Gu, into the Taiyuan Hospital as medical assistants after the beginning of the spring. They had studied medicine for several years before entering school, and they were basically disciples of various families. After they entered the Imperial Physician Office, they were selected into a separate class within half a year, and the teaching schedule was different from other classes. After more than a year of study, although there are still a lot of things that have not been learned, several people in the Imperial Physician think that they will not learn much if they read books and study in the Imperial Physician Office. Of patients. As for Zheng Gu, the 3 of them have been working in the Imperial Physician's Office for almost a year. But there are only so many patients in the palace, so the Imperial Physician's Office decided to organize several free clinics after the spring. It is impossible to be free for free. It is already very expensive to use the emperor's private treasury to maintain the operation of the Imperial Physician's Office. It is impossible for him to pay for the medicinal materials for free clinics. Moreover, Imperial Physician Xiao and Man Bao had discussed privately, and they all felt that they could prepare to work in medical offices in various places in autumn and winter, and there would definitely be another expense at that time. No matter whether this cost comes from the emperor's private treasury or the national treasury, it is definitely not easy to get it, so at this time, you have to be careful, and you can't give everyone the impression that the Imperial Physician's Office is very expensive. So the imperial doctors in the Imperial Hospital got together and thought about it for several days, and finally decided to ask the major pharmacies in the capital for help. Of course, instead of letting them produce the medicinal materials in vain, the medicine will be cheaper. Their students prescribe the prescription and take the prescription to the cooperative pharmacy to buy medicine, and they have to be cheaper. There was Imperial Physician Zheng at Ji Shitang, which was very likely to be persuaded, so Imperial Physician Lu assigned Man Bao a Baohe Medical Center. The reason is that she seemed to be on good terms with the Baohe Medical Center next door when she was sitting in Jes Etang. Man Bao just took a rest yesterday and decided to take another day off today and go to Baohe Medical Center tomorrow. Since Ji Shitang agreed to cooperate, it should not be difficult to ask Baohe Medical Center. After all, they are neighbors, not only neighbors, but also colleagues. Man Bao turned over a page of medical books and wrote down some important knowledge points while reading. Bai Dalan felt that his eyes were a little tired. He put down the book and stretched out. When he looked up and saw that the 3 of them were still sitting and looking down at the book, he couldn't help sighing. The 3 of them didn't lift their heads and didn't speak. Baidalan was embarrassed to twist his neck again, he could only quietly tilt his head to look out the window, just in time to see his wife coming with a tray. He quickly got up and opened the door. There were 2 trays of dim sum in the tray. Cheng Shi smiled at her husband, and said to the 3 people in the room, "It's all over, take a break and eat some dim sum to warm your stomach." The 3 of them also smelled the aroma, and when they looked up, they saw the steaming glutinous rice cakes and meat patties on the plate. The eyes of the 3 of them lit up, and they put down the books in their hands one after another. They didn't dislike the cold water in the study. This meatloaf is a snack that Xiao Qian's recently learned, so let's just count it as a snack. Because Man Bao saw a recipe in the book, saying that it was delicious to fry chicken wrapped in flour, so Man Bao, who had not eaten meat for a long time after crying out of the palace, couldn't hold back and pester Xiao Qian to give it to him. "She eats fried chicken." Little Qian couldn't resist. Not only did he kill a chicken and fry it for her, he also used other things to fry it according to this recipe, such as pork, mutton, and fish. In the end, Man Bao's favorite food was fried fish wrapped in flour. Wrapped in the taste of fried chicken. It's a pity that I didn't want to eat Xiao Qian's later, because it was too expensive. Even if I wanted 1 chicken at a time, it also cost a lot of oil. Fish is also fine, but the fish in the capital is much more expensive than those in Lujiang County, and they can't always be bought, so Mr. Qian didn't want to fry them in the end. But she still thought about it, and she didn't know how to think about it later. She kneaded flour, filled it with meat filling, cut it into strips and steamed it again, and then fried it again. Because it was steamed ahead of time and oily, not much oil is consumed after frying, and there is no fishy smell like fried fish. The main reason is that the meat consumption is actually not much, because she also added other things to the meat filling, and filling it too much will make it greasy. It is this little bit that makes people think more. This meat patty is crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. Only the surface layer is crispy. When you bite it lightly, the inside is the sweetness of wheat noodles, and the very salty meat is at the very end. This new snack comes out, not only full of treasures. Bai Shan and Bai Erlang liked it, as did Mrs. Lu and Mr. Chuang. Mr. Chuang, who had been eating with the Bai family, went to the Zhou family for a 10-day meal. In the end, Aunt Rong learned this craft and fried it from time to time for everyone to eat before he came back. Baidalan also liked it very much, almost every 3 mouthfuls, but they didn't eat in a hurry and chewed slowly. Cheng Shi looked at it with a smile, and Baidalan took one for her. Cheng Shi took it and couldn't help frowning slightly after taking a bite. She endured it, and finally swallowed it. Man Bao turned his head and glanced at her, looked her up and down, looked at her face, and asked, "Sister-in-law, did you just wake up?" Cheng Shi nodded embarrassedly. It's easy to oversleep during a winter nap. Man Bao threw all the meat patties in his hand into his mouth, and asked after eating, "I remember when senior brother Bai came to the study in the morning and said you were still asleep." Cheng's face turned red. It's easy to get sleepy in winter. Man Bao grabbed her hand and said, "I'll show you." After saying that, he took her pulse and asked after a while, "Is your menstrual period coming this month?" Cheng Shi was stunned for a moment, remembering something, looking at her and shaking his head with some anticipation. "If you don't say it, I forgot, it seems to be 5 days late." But she was usually about 7 days late, so she and the girls didn't care too much. Man Bao put down his hand and said, "The days are too shallow, wait a minute, but it is indeed the Huamai." Not only Cheng Shi and Bai Dalan, but also Bai Shan and Bai Erlang opened their mouths in shock. See you at 6 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2022. Bai Shan looked at the meat patties that he had not eaten in his hand, and handed it to Bai Dalan. "Big brother, let's eat this for you, and make up for it." Bai Dalan ignored him at all, stretched out his hand to hold his wife's hand and said excitedly, I'm going to be a father." Bai Erlang also came back to his senses, and only now did he say in surprise, am I going to be an uncle? Man Bao was also very happy for them, but seeing Bai Erlang's surprise, she still said reservedly, I'm going to be an aunt too. Bai Erlang said, didn't you always be an aunt? Man Bao said, my sixth sister-in-law is also pregnant, but it's not yet 3 months, so I didn't say anything. Bai Erlang, you already said that last 10 days off. Sister-in-law's pregnancy on Saturday was diagnosed during the last 10-day break. The whole family knew about it at that time, naturally including the Bai family. It is said that it is not to be passed on, but it is just not to be passed on. Seeing that they had to fight for this, Bai Shan took another look at the elder brother in the lobby who had already helped Cheng Shi to sit down and ask for warmth and ignored them. What delicious! The space is reserved for couples. Bai Dalan and Chengs were really excited and happy. The two of them sat in the study for a quarter of an hour. After the excitement had passed for a while, Bai Dalan carefully helped Chengs back to the house, but he still felt weak. Soft, and the whole person is buoyant. Cheng Shi was more stable than Bai Dalan, at least she felt that she was stepping on the ground. Speaking of which, it has been more than a year since the two of them got married, and they have never had any children. When Master Bai and Madam Bai were there, they quietly entrusted Man Bao to the two of them. But in fact, there was no need for them to ask. Chengs quietly took Saturday's sister-in-law to find Man Bao to see. Man Bao was sure that the four of them had nothing wrong, and comforted the two sister-in-law in turn. My mother said that the child depends on fate. Yes, sometimes fate comes when the child comes. Reassure the two not to rush. On Saturday, the sister-in-law paid off, and Lao's Hutu and Qian did not urge him. The main reason is that they have too many children, and it is not conspicuous that Saturday Lang does not have children for the time being. Saturday Lang himself is not in a hurry. Every day he runs at the restaurant at home, learns to cook some dishes with Xiao Qian when he has time, and occasionally takes his sister-in-law Saturday out to play. So Saturday's sister-in-law also let go after being nervous for a while, but Cheng's pressure has been great, especially after it was reported that Saturday's sister-in-law was pregnant. The husband and wife supported each other back to the house, and the three Man Bao, who went to the kitchen for a round, left with the delicious food. It didn't take long for the family to know about it. The Zhou family is now the head of the Xiaoqian family. She thought about it and then said, since eating meat pie sticks makes you vomit, then you want to eat it lightly. It just so happened that your elder brother came back with a lot of cabbage from Zhuangzi. Make her a cabbage soup and have Lijun send it to her later. Mrs. Lu also knew, and immediately called for the people who were serving in the yard of the two of them, and said, the ice in the yard must be shoveled clean, and there are 2 more people around. When you go in and out, you must help them. There is no such thing as pickling in their house, but these accidents should be paid attention to at all times, and they should not be careless. He mentioned the precautions that pregnant women should take, and then said, it's still light now, don't talk about it for the time being, let's talk about it after 3 months. People should get down. Because he couldn't speak out, Bai Dalan, who wanted to write a letter back to tell his parents, could only endure it. He didn't even say anything about it at home. I heard that he couldn't talk about it often, or the mother-in-law would be scared away. Because Zhou Man was an official and was still in the period of national mourning, Bai Dalan did not invite her to drink when everyone had dinner together the next day, but invited her to drink a bowl of soup and drank a glass of wine happily. Man Bao. She could only take the soup, and took Bai Dalan's thanks with the soup instead of the wine. Different from the many scruples on the capital side, there is a lively scene on the side of Qilai village. Civilians only need to serve filial piety for 3 months, which is long overdue. Therefore, the marriages that were postponed because of the national mourning were concentrated in the past 2 days before the year. The same is true in Qilai village. After entering the 12th lunar month, 3 happy events were held in a row, and the neighbors of the village had to go to drink if they were close to each other. Uncle Qian's family also had two grandsons who were going to marry their daughter-in-law this year. Also because of this, Thursday Lang, who returned home, was unable to go to Beijing, so he simply stayed at home for a year, and collected a wave of tea after the spring of next year before leaving. There are 2 days before the Chinese New Year. The old Zhou family's New Year's goods have already been prepared, and the rest is to prepare various things in the kitchen to prepare for the New Year. This year, MRSGN was away, and the family really disliked Mr. Feng's craftsmanship. In the end, MRSGN went into the kitchen and let the second and third daughters-in-law prepare for it. Old Zhutu has nothing to do, just sit under the big banyan tree at the head of the village and brag to people. Not only are there many people here, but the sun is also good. He can talk to people while basking in the sun. People in Qilai village like to talk around him now, mainly because Master Bai is too reserved, and he doesn't like to sit and talk with them. And in their village, they have been to the capital to enjoy happiness, and only the old Zhou family are well informed. Uncle Jin, you have seen the prince, have you seen the emperor? The old Zhutu regretted, I haven't seen it before. Can anyone see the emperor? It's just full of treasures. You can only see it when you enter the palace every day. Everyone was amazed when they heard it, and they all felt that it was amazing. After all, Zhou Man was the one they grew up watching. But Zhou Man has been very smart since childhood, mainly because her father is also very smart. The older ones couldn't help but glance at Zhou Jin's wrinkled face and felt that although he was not as smart as his younger brother, he was lucky to have such a girl. Someone said, it's better to marry a daughter-in-law. Yeah, it's a pity that Jian Jiuzheng has many grandchildren and few granddaughters, otherwise. Look at the next generation. It's not easy. Uncle Jin's family doesn't have many granddaughters now. Hey, by the way, Uncle Jin, did Arya say they kissed? Zhou Jin waved his hand and said, not yet. Her grandmother and I can't tell about her marriage, so I have to mention it. The people who were just thinking about it couldn't help but ask, why? Too capable, Zhou Jin said without hesitation, she can make more money than her fourth uncle now, and it would be too aggrieved to say that ordinary people are too aggrieved. My grandma and I know few people. So I gave it to her aunt. Zhou Lijun is not too young, and when he was in the capital, the old Zhutu was not in a hurry, but after Saturday's Lang, he and Qian's forbearance skills have both improved a lot. When Zhou Lijun came back from the grassland, he asked the old couple to settle an account, mainly to calculate the money she made this year and what she did on this trip to the grassland. Then he said directly to the old Zhutu Qian, Grandpa, Grandma, I don't want to go back to farming. Old Zhutu didn't realize it at the time, and said directly, who told you to go back to farming? Is it your mother? Qian understands the meaning of the granddaughter, and after thinking for a while, he said, I will let your sister-in-law take care of your marriage, and you should pay attention to it yourself. If you don't want to farm, don't plant it. We are not as good as you all year round. If you go out and earn a fraction of the money, you can just support yourself. See you at 9. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2023. It didn't take long for the old Zhutu to hear what Feng said at the head of the village. She immediately went to Jian and said, Mother, Man Bao wants to kiss Arya, what kind of family are you talking about? Jian, I haven't had a shadow yet, don't worry. Arya is so old, so don't worry, all the girls in the village who are the same age as her are the mothers of 2 children. Jian's hands didn't stop, and continued to hold the dough. What are you afraid of? It's too late for Lu Lang to get married, didn't he also say a good marriage? Feng Shi was thoughtful, and felt that what her mother-in-law said was right, but, she hadn't seen her daughter for 2 years, and she didn't know what happened to her. Feng Shi couldn't help but ask, "Mother, are you and your father still going to the capital during the Chinese New Year?" Qian thought for a while and said, "Don't worry, if there are too many things at home, I won't go." Feng Shi wanted them to go, even though she couldn't go with her. They could watch the children a little while they went. The two girls were both in the capital, and they were not too young, so it was time to say kiss. Qian calmed his daughter-in-law, then turned to Zhou Lang, who was repairing farm implements, and said, "San Lang, it's getting late, go and call your father back." In the past, this kind of thing was done by the children in the family, but now that the children are not at home, Zhou Lang can only put down the work at hand and call his father. When Lao Zhutu was called back, he was still a little unfulfilled, and the villagers were also still unfinished. A few people who had a good time with him also walked back together, and then stood outside the wall of Lao Zhou's house and talked for a long time before dispersing. Now the old Zhou family is very decent in Qilai village, and their popularity looks better than before. This is not only because Man Bao has become an official and is the most promising person in Qilai village, but also because of the influence of the old Zhou family on Qilai village. Many people in the village now grow medicinal materials. Yam, ginger, and privet are grown in several acres. Some of the collected medicinal materials are sold to the county seat, Fukan, and neighboring counties for Zhou Yulang, Thursday Lang sold further afield. In the past 2 years, they have made a lot of money because of this, so this time, 4 families in Niuguang village bought the dozen or so heads that Chuolang brought back. Others were sold to several nearby villages. Because they are all villagers, Lao Zhutu is less likely to call the shots, and each cow is about 100 cents less than what is sold in the county cattle market. When old Zhutu made this decision, he was a little distressed, but he said to his sons, "This is the root of our family. I will always come back here in the future, so I will give the benefits to the villagers. Most of your brothers are outside now. The villagers build houses, marry wives, and send off the elderly. You all can't help, love it can only be given from elsewhere." Tuesday Lang and the others nodded in agreement. Old Zhutu changed his voice and said, "But you can't give too much. The money at home is earned by your hard work. It's dangerous to go out to do business." But Jian Shi said, "Shen Min fights me Zhou, even if you bring your cousins and cousins, you must also pay attention to your sense of proportion, give what you should give, and don't give what you shouldn't give, otherwise good people will be spoiled by you." Already. This time back, Shu Yulang planned to take the 2 cousins of the Qian family out, mainly in and out of the grasslands, and it was only his own life that he would give his life for many things. It's not that they haven't encountered any danger. Last time, they added 2 more vehicles because of lack of manpower. The people were hired now. As a result, they ran away when they encountered danger, and they also passed some of their goods. However, the 3 sons he brought and the people under Xiang Mingxiu's hands were stable, so Shiro felt that his own people were easy to use. On Tuesday, Lang is now in charge of the medicinal materials business in several nearby counties and prefectures. Every time he goes out, he invites young people from the village and people from his uncle's family. However, he is only busy in autumn and winter. Because of these, the old Zhou family is now very prestigious in the village, and even the village chief likes to come over to talk with Zhou Lang about anything. Of course, after Lao Zhutu and the others came back, they turned to Lao Zhutu to discuss. This time, the village chief asked Lao Zhutu to discuss whether to offer a pig head to the ancestor this year. Qilai village used to be very poor. When worshipping ancestors, there were chickens, meat, and fish, but they didn't offer pig heads very much. After all, pig heads were very expensive. The last time I gave a pig head to my ancestor was because I heard that Man Bao had become an official, and the village itself became lively once. The last time was because Zhou Yin was wronged, and he was posthumously named Mian Zhou Shepherd. The village chief mentioned this to discuss with Lao Zhutu, and let him pay by the way, not all, but the big one. This is also a customary rule in the village. Whoever is richer will pay more. After all, the ancestors bless them. In the past, the old Zhou family used to sell more or less, and belonged to the middle group. But Lao Zhutu was not stingy at all in this regard. He agreed without thinking about it. He didn't need to ask Qian for the money, he took the money himself, and said to the village chief, "You must let the ancestors bless you. Our family is prosperous and rich, and everyone in the family is safe and healthy." Village chief, does he need to find him if he has this ability? He made all the sacrifices of the ancestors by himself. But he said, "Uncle Jin, don't worry, the ancestors will bless your family." Kilai village was very lively. From the 30th day of the new year, it started to fire, and it was the most released on the morning of the first day of the first day of the first year of the first year. This side of the capital is also very lively, but it is lively with ordinary people. This year, officials only meet briefly to pay New Year's greetings, and it's almost the same as above. Except for their relatives and officials, even boxing is not collected. As for the banquet, no one dared to drink and celebrate with great fanfare unless the door was closed to drink secretly. However, as soon as the 8th yamen was opened, 7 or 8 officials were impeached for a banquet during the period of national filial piety, and 1 person was a concubine during the period of national filial piety. Then Manbao's first great court meeting in the new year saw that 8 officials were demoted. The concubine was demoted directly from the capital, from the 5th rank to the 7th rank, and was placed in a lower county. Order to go. Manbao raised his head very much, and then became a little uncertain. After retreating, he quickly chased 2 steps to catch up with the Tang magistrate. Magistrate Tang turned to look at her curiously and asked, "What's wrong?" Manbao pulled him to a remote place, lowered his voice and asked, "I know that it is a taboo to have a concubine in a country, so is it considered to be in the same room?" The Tang County magistrate twisted his face and lowered his voice, "Who will spy on the boudoir thing if it doesn't cause death? What if there is a fatality?" Tang County magistrate. He looked Zhou Man up and down, and asked in a low voice, "Who is it that I begged you to come here? See you tomorrow." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2024. Manbao shook his head and asked in a low voice, "It's not officials, it's just ordinary people." Tang County magistrate's back straightened, looked at Manbao with contempt, and said, "Don't say that the people don't sue the officials and don't investigate this kind of thing. Even if the people sue, the officials don't usually investigate. The dynasty's requirements for national filial piety are not very strict, but they are not allowed to hold happy events. As long as you don't think about the guests of the banquet such as marriage, opening a store, and housewarming within 3 months of national filial piety, generally this kind of husband and wife things in between won't matter. There are nearly 4 million people in the entire Dajin household, and 90% of them are ordinary people. How can you really ask so many people to be like a monk for 3 months?" Magistrate Tang stared at Manbao and asked in a low voice, "Are you going to have a baby in your family?" Manbao thought for a while and said, "Well, it's still a short time, it's only a month, so it's hard to say it, I just tell you." Tang County magistrate, "How about cheating? Why did you ask him for filial piety after only a month?" "But she is a doctor," she said yes. When Manbao returned to Chongguan Hall, he went to Mr. Zhuang and told him about the precautions in the early stage of pregnancy. Mr. Zhuang listened carefully, went back to find Zhou Dalin, and said to him, "Manbao said that your 6th brother's wife's life is the same as that of Dalin's wife, within 2 days. Zhou Dalin was puzzled, "Isn't it a month earlier?" Rokuro and the others also planned to tell the Chiu family after the first month. Mr. Zhuang said, "It's the same as Dalin's daughter-in-law. It's only been a month and a half, so it's not easy to diagnose the pulse. Let's wait another 2 months before talking about it. Even the Chiu family will not talk about it. He said, after all, it's too close to the national filial piety period, and Manbao is an official, so it's hard to say. Only then did Zhou Dalin understand, and he immediately responded, "Thank you, sir, I'll go back and talk to Liao Lang." On Saturday, where did Lang think of such a thing? They used to be very ordinary people. They knew that they couldn't say kisses during a national mourning, and couldn't have a happy event, but they didn't know that they couldn't even cough. Zhou Dalin asked him, "Did your parents-in-law know that the sixth sibling is pregnant?" "No," said Saturday Lang, "because my sister-in-law said that it's not good for children to talk about life, so we didn't say anything about it." Manbao couldn't hold back his words, and he happily told Bai Shan and Bai Erlang as soon as he came out of the diagnosis, and then all the other families knew about it, otherwise it was only the old Zhou family who knew about it. Zhou Dalin breathed a sigh of relief, and said to him, "Then push the days back a month, that's fine, the child is older and then talk about it, be safe." Saturday Lang nodded again and again. He didn't want to cause trouble for Manbao, and was a little worried. Is it so strict as an official? Will someone come to the house to check? Zhou Dalin comforted him, "No, if we don't tell anyone about this kind of thing, who will check it? And Manbao is a doctor. We don't need outsiders to see a doctor or take medicine in our family." "Is it as long as she said?" On Saturday, Lang I thought about it too, and he felt relieved. He went back to the house and told MRSQ that MRSQ was a little disappointed. "I thought I could tell my parents right away to make them happy." "Wait 1 more month, then we will go back and say in person," said Saturday Lang. Big Brother said, Mr. Zhuang said, "This morning, because the officials did not obey the rules during the period of national filial piety, all of them were demoted, and one of them was even driven out. If you leave the capital, you may not be able to come back in the future." When Qiu Shi heard this, she immediately said, "Then let's be careful, I'll go out less in the future, and let my sister-in-law and the others speak the same way." Qiu Shi thought of something, her face blushed, and she was a little embarrassed, so she couldn't help but slammed Saturday Lang, "It's all your fault, how can I go out to meet people in the future?" Sachiro. But there was nothing unusual about the Zhou family. The next day, everyone treated her as usual. Even if there was nothing bad about the Bai family, the Cheng family came over to play with her. "Our days are similar, I was planning to give the child makes clothes, do you want to join us?" Qiu Shi nodded immediately, and the two entered the door with their front and back feet. They were also pregnant. Although one was a lady from the official family and the other was the daughter of a small businessman, they were quite understandable. So the two went together. On Saturday, Lang breathed a sigh of relief when he saw it. Manbao said that pregnant women like to think too much, so she should not be too dull and thoughtful, not only hurting herself, but also hurting the children. Manbao in the palace got the accurate news from Mr. Zhuang, completely relieved, and started busy with the free clinic of the Imperial Physician's office. Imperial Physician Xiao simply said, "In this free clinic, in addition to the 12 people from Zhengku, 80 people will be selected from the Imperial Physician's office to be their helpers. The steps are fine." Imperial Physician Lu didn't have any opinion, "You can just learn some eyebrows to help the leader." "Man Bayadao, I have read the list of preferential medicinal materials sent by each family. All the medicinal materials needed for basic illnesses are available. I have asked Zhenggu and the others to copy them. When they are copied, they will be given to each of you." Dr. Xiao said, "Then set a date, and have someone to post an announcement." Zhenggu and the others had better memorize all these medicinal materials, so as not to use medicinal materials without discounts, and it will be ugly to look back. After thinking about it, Manbao said, "Today is the 9th day of the first lunar month. The 15th day is definitely lively, but it's not very convenient for us. At the time of the Mid-Autumn Festival, there was a stampede in the capital. Although it was not a big deal because of the death of the Queen Mother, the Tang magistrate was reprimanded and made a note. It's just that he caught a few traffickers at that time, and finally pulled out the radish and brought out the mud, and in one fell swoop, he wiped out the human traffickers gang that had been active in the Jiangyi area. Even Imperial physician Xiao and others in the Taiyuan hospital have heard about this. Most of those girls are going to be sold to Jiangnan, and it is estimated that they will never come back. Also because the Empress Dowager passed away, his credit was not publicized, and the credit and demerit were balanced in the end. During the Chinese New Year, the magistrate of Tang has strict control over the capital, and even the magistrate Guo from Wanyan County is much stronger. In addition, most of the rich and powerful are still in the period of filial piety during the Lunar New Year, except for some wealthy businessmen. Not many people dare to have fun outside. So this year is very safe, but Imperial physician Xiao also knows that the sheds that several pharmacies want to support have been arranged on another street, and they are not allowed to get together again. He was also afraid that something would happen to the free clinic during the Lantern Festival, so he said, then push it back and set it on the 18th day, 4 days, how about the 18th to the 21st? Manbao and others thought about it for a while, but they all had no opinion, so they should come down. They settled here, and Imperial physician Lu wrote a document and reported it. Seeing that they only asked to maintain order, as well as some desks, chairs, shelves, and the like, they agreed with a big hand. The former will be handed over to Jingzhou Mansion, and Jingzhou Mansion will be handed over to the magistrates of the two counties, so they won't be troubled. The latter, it's also simple. It's enough for all ministries to get together and move some out of the warehouse, and return them later. That's it. See you at 6 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2025. When the matter was settled, the two counties in the capital posted the announcement of the free clinic. The magistrate Tang even kindly informed the districts under his jurisdiction, and even sent the officers to go to the countryside to take care of all the villages and li under his jurisdiction. All the villages were notified, and even in order to prevent them from running in vain, they even asked the officers to stagger the time for them. The county magistrate Guo only posted announcements, but he heard that the magistrate Tang did so carefully, so he did the same. So in the early morning of the 18th day of the first lunar month, as soon as the inner and outer city gates opened, many people braved the cold to enter the city, and some people carried people with wooden boards. For the first time, the soldiers guarding the gate saw so many people carrying people into the city in one day, so they couldn't help but ask a few more questions. The man carrying a pale and thin woman said, "I heard that the imperial physician's office is going to open a free clinic, and there is an imperial physician sitting in the hall, so I brought my daughter-in-law to have a look." The soldier couldn't help but glanced at the person on the wooden board. She only had one head exposed, and she was covered with several blue quilts, layered on top of each other. It was almost impossible to see the ups and downs of people's breathing. Crushed. The soldiers looked at them up and down and found nothing prohibited, so they waved them into the city. It was their first time in Beijing, and they couldn't help but ask the people who passed by, "How do I get to the imperial physician's office?" "Go straight, go into the inner city and look for it again." The person being asked glanced at them and felt that their accent did not seem to be near the capital, so they asked, "Which village are you from?" "Luo village." The other party asked woodenly, "Is there this village in Chang'an County?" "We're not from Chang'an County, we're from Fengzhou. When we were 14, we heard that the imperial physician in the capital was going to open a free clinic. We didn't even go home at 15, so we came directly. Isn't that right? After walking for 4 days, it's finally here." "Did you come here?" "Yeah, it's the first time I've come to such a far place. The capital is really far away." "Far too far, It only takes a day to ride a horse from the capital to Fengzhou, the carriage is slower, and it takes a day and a half to arrive, walking. The person who was stopped for questioning glanced at the woman on the wooden board and pointed, "Then you have to hurry. There is a little genius doctor in the imperial hospital surnamed Zhou. That is a female imperial doctor. She treats women very badly." The man's eyes were bright and he said, "I know that she cured the crown prince's illness and asked for the little emperor's grandson. We just heard that she also came to sit in the hall. Otherwise, he has never been out of Fengzhou when he is so old, how dare he go out to the capital?" He glanced at her daughter-in-law, and the doctor in Fengzhou was helpless, but he really didn't want his daughter-in-law to die, so he was the only daughter-in-law. The people from Luo village thanked him and accelerated their pace towards the inner city. Man Bao took a deep breath into his palm and stomped his feet on the ground. Bai Shan saw it and said, "Let's do a set of punches, it won't be cold after you hit it." She just put her hand in her sleeve, and she really doesn't want to take it out now, but what Bai Shan said is reasonable, and today she has to take the students for a free clinic, so she has to cheer up. So she nodded, finally took her hand out of her sleeve, and followed Bai Shan to punch slowly. After hitting her once, she also got hot, so she just followed him for the second time. Bai Erlang and Yin or Lu Huan finally washed up and went to the cafeteria to eat, but when they walked out of the yard, they couldn't see under the tree not far away. "The two are punching," Lu Huan said with sour teeth. "Why do they always get up so early? They can always get together." Bai Erlang raised his eyelids and glanced at it, not surprised. He walked to the side of the road and shouted at them, "Have breakfast." Bai Shan complied and finished punching. He and Man Bao came over after finishing the momentum. At this time, their foreheads were sweating, and Man Bao didn't feel cold anymore. "Sure enough, we still have to punch." Man Bao went out of the palace after eating breakfast. Imperial physician Xiao and Imperial physician Lu did not even enter the palace gate, but went directly from home. Today, Imperial physician Lu is on duty in the palace. When we arrived at the Imperial physician's office, there were already many people standing or sitting in front of them. When they saw a carriage stopping at the entrance of the Imperial physician's office, the people who were sitting stood up and looked, and the officers who came to maintain order shouted, get up, they are all arranged for me, there is one pit for each patient, not many rows." Man Bao got out of the car carrying the medicine box, turned his head and glanced at the waiting people, then glanced at the tables and chairs that had been put out and the curtains put up beside him, then turned and entered the Imperial physician's office. There is a large open space in front of the Imperial physician's office and the Imperial College, and the two prefectures also have bulletin boards in front of them. This time, the Imperial physician's office and the Imperial College have borrowed land and directly occupied the large piece of land outside their walls. There are tables, chairs, and tents, which are actually simple sheds. Entering the Imperial physician's office, it is also lively inside, and the selected students have been waiting for a long time. This time, the places were based on grades, and Zhou Liru was among them. She used to recognize and memorize medicinal materials in Ji Shitang before, and she had no experience. This time, she was actually here to see what the teachers and senior brothers did. Man Bao didn't take them, or they weren't worth taking now, he just watched and helped. What they needed to teach by hand were the 12 selected students, and Man Bao's disciples accounted for 3. Dr. Xiao is like a fine person. As soon as she came in, she said, "You came just in time. We have 6 of these 12 people. It's going to be a fight, so let's draw lots." Among the 12 people, only Lu Sunyang was a woman, and Man Bao said directly, "I only draw one, and Sunyang will always follow me." The other imperial physicians thought that they were all men, and it was really inconvenient to take Lu Sunyang, so they nodded in agreement. Imperial physician Lu smiled and found Lu Sunyang's in a handful of paper balls and took it out, then shook the remaining paper balls, and looked at everyone after messing up. Everyone asked Imperial Physician Lu to arrest him first. After all, his status is relatively high right now, isn't he? Imperial Physician Lu let it go for a while, then he was not polite, grabbed 2 paper balls and came out, and then Imperial Physician Xiao. According to age and seniority, Man Bao rang, and finally there is only one left on the table. She picked it up silently and opened it up, and when she met everyone's bright eyes, she unfolded it to show them, Shi Xiu. When everyone heard it, their faces were different. Dr. Xiao stroked his beard and smiled, yes, I remember that the relationship between Dr. Zhou and the shopkeeper Shi of Baohe Medical Center is also good. Of course Man Bao knew about Shi Xiu. He was the youngest son of the shopkeeper Shi. He had studied medicine for many years before he came in. I heard that both of his brothers wanted to enter the Thai hospital, but they failed several exams. The Thai hospital also had no connections, so he couldn't go in and become a medical assistant, so he gave up later. At that time, as soon as the Imperial Physician's office opened, the shopkeeper Shi brought back his youngest son, who was studying outside. He was 1 year younger than Zheng Gu and just stepped on the age line to enter the Imperial Physician's office. Everyone knows that he, like Zheng Gu, came to the Taiyuan hospital. Man Bao is nothing, it doesn't matter who he came from, anyway, he is a student of the Imperial Physician's office, and most of them have listened to her class. So Man Bao took the note, I'm looking for someone. Let's go together. Man Bao went out with everyone and asked, who brought Zheng Gu and Zheng Xiao? Dr. Xiao and a Dr. Fang responded and said it was them. Man Bao asked them to take care of him more. See you at 9. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2026. Shi Xiu heard that he was following Imperial Physician Zhou, and his eyes lit up with excitement. Everyone in the Imperial Physician office knew that Imperial Physician Zhou had the best medical skills, and could be on par with Imperial Physician Xiao Lu. Man Bao took Lu Sunyang and Shi Xiu out and sat down at the table with her name on it. She opened her medicine box, took out the pulse pillow, and said to the two, let the patient come forward. This is where it starts. Since it is a free clinic for cultivating students, Man Bao focuses on cultivating them, but he does not completely hand over the patients to them. When the patient came forward, Man Bao read it once, and taught the two of them while watching, you have all learned about it, but you may not always remember it when you see a doctor. She said this not only to the two of them, but also to the students who were watching and studying behind them. After she felt the pulse, she asked them, come on, you two, come and ask questions. Lu Sunyang had long experience of sitting in the hall. Seeing that Shi Xiu was nervous, she asked first. It was the first time the patient saw a doctor teaching on the spot, so she didn't dare to rush her and answered stumblingly. Lu Sunyang asked Shi Xiu a question, and Shi Xiu nervously asked another question and she picked it up again. After the two asked 3 or 4 questions, it was gone. Man Bao nodded, and after adding a question, he asked the two to feel the pulse, and then asked them to write a pulse case and prescribe a prescription. When they wrote the pulse case and prescribed the prescription, Man Bao also wrote the pulse case and prescription, and explained some precautions to the patient, then handed the prescription to him, pointed to the Imperial Physician's office behind him, and said, go inside to get the medicine. The student behind him immediately led the patient in, took his prescription and glanced at it, then followed him in excitedly, and handed the prescription to the classmate who was helping inside to get the medicine. The students of the Imperial Physician Department had taken the medicine, and the doctors dispatched by the pharmacies calculated the money, and then they could check out and leave. Said that the medicinal materials will be cheap, it is indeed cheap. Obviously, This patient is not the first time to treat this disease. He found that one pair of medicines this time was less than 11 cents less than before, so he happily grabbed 6 pairs and left. While seeing a doctor, Man Bao told Shi Xiu, "You should be careful when you see a doctor, and you should also memorize the pulse case carefully. It's best that you can recall the patient you saw in your mind just by looking at the pulse case later." She said, "Your pulse records and prescriptions must be kept. When I finish reading the patient in the evening, I will collect them together for review." That's how she taught Zhenggu and the others. After all, when there were many patients, she couldn't criticize and give instructions on the spot. Shi Xiu understands that he should take note of it carefully, and the students who observe it behind them also take note of it seriously. Zhou Liru was standing behind her aunt with a small notebook in her hand. She remembered 3 items of observation and inquiries. The notebook also listed numbers, which represented the number of patients. My sister-in-law said that no matter how good a person's memory is, they are not as detailed as recorded on the spot with a pen. Because the officers knew from the very beginning which imperial doctor the table belonged to, they were organizing people to line up, and those with female patients would try their best to be placed in the full row. Seeing that some people disliked the long queue here, they also persuaded, "This is the table of the imperial physician Zhou, the only female imperial physician in the imperial hospital." There are those who stop and continue to queue, and naturally there are those who change to other people's queues. Among them, the queues of Imperial Physician Xiao and Imperial Physician Lu are the most popular. When the two saw it, their hearts were still quite complicated, both a little relieved and a little tired. There were also many people who came specifically for Zhou Man. She used to be fine in Ji Shitang, and many people could still find her, but since she entered the Taiyuan hospital, it has been difficult for ordinary people to find her for medical treatment. More people from other places rushed to the capital after hearing the news, so there were a lot of female patients in front of Man Bao. Usually, they met 3 female patients after seeing 1 male patient, and then met 1 male patient again. Shi Xiu was a little excited at first, but then became a little embarrassed. Seeing it, Man Bao lowered his voice and said to him while he was changing patients, "Women's diseases are also very important. Women make up half of the world, and many doctors spend their whole lives only learning about the skins, even me, now I'm only a rough guide. 2. Just study hard." Shi Xiu froze, and immediately responded respectfully. It's just that some illnesses are really difficult for him to ask about his condition, and even a patient will feel even more uncomfortable when facing him. But this is human nature, and Man Bao does not force it. When it was about noon, 2 men came up with a wooden board. When Man Bao saw it, he couldn't help but froze for a moment, then got up and went down to look. The man said cautiously, "Zhou, Imperial Dr. Zhou, you can show my daughter-in-law." Man Bao squatted down to look, and seeing that there was no blood on her face, he reached out and touched her face, only to feel cold. Even Lu Sunyang was startled, "Is this still alive?" The man was afraid that they wouldn't look at it, so he nodded immediately and said, "Alive, alive, baby, mother, baby, wake up." The woman was silent. The man was a little nervous. He was sweating even in the cold weather, so he wanted to reach out and push her. Man Bao had already reached in and touched her hand, and then took a pulse. When the man saw her frown and closed his eyes, he didn't dare to stretch out his hand and looked at her nervously. When Man Bao squatted down, she smelled a faint smell of blood, and when she felt her pulse again, she knew it. Such a serious illness. Man Bao frowned and looked at the man. "How long has she given birth?" "It's been 3 months, that one, bleeding all the time, and taking a lot of medicine, even ginseng. Although it is ginseng, it has almost emptied the family." Man Bao frowned and thought about it. This is not something that can be cured by 1 or 2 prescriptions. "Where do you live?" thinking that she could go and see again later. The man was a little embarrassed, He hesitated for a while before whispering, we are not from the capital, we are from Fengzhou. Man Bao was surprised for a moment, then asked, where do you live, and how long do you plan to stay in the capital? The man said, you gave us the prescription, and we will go back after taking the medicine. She can't just take medicine in her situation. Man Bao looked at the clothes on his body, and the people and the quilt on the board. She sighed, even if you use the most expensive medicine, at least it takes about 3 months to change 3 prescriptions before you can get better, and if you use ordinary medicine, you need to be accompanied by acupuncture. The man was stunned for a moment and then gritted his teeth. Then you prescribe the medicine, and then give her an injection, and we will send her tomorrow. The people behind him objected, brother, this can't be done. The dry food we brought is enough for 10 days. Staying in an inn is very expensive. Let's go to the Chenghuang temple to live. Man Bao, the city god temple in the capital can't be crowded. She glanced at the people on the ground, for fear that they would really take people to live in the temple of the city god, and the weather in the first month would freeze people to death. She looked at them suspiciously. You didn't come here from Fengzhou, did you stay outside all the time? No, said the man, we live in a post house. That's right, we live in a firewood house. It's still very warm to burn a brazier. My sister-in-law is covered with the quilt, so it's not cold at all. Man Bao. Lu Sunyang, you say it's not cold, you don't you know that a pregnant woman with persistent lochia can't get cold? Even Shi Xiu was so angry with these men. See you tomorrow. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2027. Man Bao frowned and didn't know what to do. After thinking about it, she got up and said, take the person to the tent. The woman's husband did not dare to neglect, and immediately called his brother to carry his wife to a tent on the side. When he went in, he found that there was also a wooden bed, but the legs were made of bricks, and there was a wooden board on top. Just a piece of cloth. Man Bao lifted the quilt on her body and let the man carry the person onto the wooden bed before letting him out. With this movement, the sleeping person finally woke up. She opened her eyes to see so many people and was stunned for a while. The man only had time to explain, He Niang, this is the imperial physician in the capital. After saying that, he bowed to Zhou Man and saluted, and then withdrew with his brothers. Man Bao rubbed the woman's hand and said with a smile, don't be afraid, I'm a doctor, I'll show you now. The woman suffered from persistent lochia after giving birth, which was actually a metrorrhagia. It seemed that the amount of bleeding was not very large, but it was also very dangerous to keep dripping and dripping continuously, which was similar to the situation of Zhou Hu's sister-in-law back then. She was able to live for 3 months because she had been taking medicines to nourish qi and blood, but unfortunately the bleeding could not be stopped, and no amount of medicines would heal her. Man Bao and Lu Sunyang checked the patient's physical condition and asked all the questions, and she began to teach Lu Sunyang how to deal with such a disease. She said, this is already a very serious disease in the underpatient, but in fact, such a disease is not uncommon, it's just the difference between seeing a doctor and not seeing a doctor. Lu Sunyang knows that many women rarely see a doctor after giving birth. Even if they do, they usually can't catch a few medicines, and they basically rely on getting sick. But in fact, the same is true for men. General illnesses can be tolerated as long as they can be endured. This is also the original intention of the establishment of the Imperial Physician's Office, so that ordinary people have a way to survive. Man Bayadao, actually, for metrorrhagia, the effect of acupuncture and moxibustion is no worse than that of taking medicine. If the two are combined, it will stop the bleeding much faster than a single one. Man Bao taught Lu Sunyang how to use acupuncture to stop bleeding, first clean up the dirt left in the body, and then stop bleeding and replenish blood. So Lu Sunyang turned around and went out, and called several female students in. After a while, 3 female students went into the imperial physician's office to get something out. Zhou Liru and his companions also carried a bucket of hot water out. They put a little hot water in a basin and served it. Zhou Man cleaned his hands, let them stand aside and watch, and only let Lu Sunyang do it. The patients were treated inside for nearly an hour. The patients waiting outside were impatient, and Shi Xiu was responsible for appeasing them. By the way, he took his small notebook and cut it all the way, taking down his pulse and prescription. While watching, he reassured, the patient's condition was relatively serious just now. You may have to wait a little longer today. If it is inconvenient, you can go to another imperial doctor first, or go home first, and the same will be the case when you come back tomorrow. After waiting for so long, it is impossible for them to go home, but go to another imperial doctor. Most of the people in this queue came for Zhou Man, and no one was willing to move their nests. Among them, there are many men who came specifically to seek children, but they all brought their wives and planned to watch the two together to see if it was their own problem or the daughter-in-law's problem. Seeing that they were unwilling to leave, Shi Xiu didn't show it on his face, but he was actually very happy. When Zhou Man and the others finally came out, Zhou Man and Lu Sunyang were fine, but the other 4 little girls were pale and their feet were a little vain. But no matter how soft their feet were, they still brought out the last basin of blood. The man standing outside saw that they had brought out a basin of blood, and he couldn't help but turn paler, and his eyes were full of prayers when he looked at Zhou Man. Man Bao said to him, "I'll take care of it. I'll prescribe medicine for her in a while, and you should boil a medicine for her to eat at the imperial physician's office before leaving." Man Bao turned around and went back to the table to prescribe the medicine. The man followed closely and asked nervously, "The imperial doctor, can my daughter-in-law be okay?" Man Bao said, "If you guys go back, it's not good to prescribe ordinary medicines. At most, you can only save your life." She said, "I'll give you 2 prescriptions, one to take now, one for 68 liters, one for half a month to 20 days, and the other for 49 after the bleeding has completely stopped. When ye pair, it will take about 3 months, but it's just to save his life. I'm afraid I won't be able to do any work in the future." The imperial doctor on the side could not help turning his head to look at her when he saw what she had said in such a detailed manner. Man Bao continued, "This is the treatment method for you to return to your hometown immediately, and there is another method. You stay in the capital. When the time comes, I will give her medicine with acupuncture and moxibustion, and change her prescription according to her condition. What kind of prescription is used, so I can't give you an estimate, but I will try not to use expensive medicinal materials. With this kind of treatment, she can save her life for about a month. If you are cured for about 3 months, she will not be able to do heavy work in the future, but ordinary housework and farm work are no problem." Man Bao didn't let him make a decision immediately. After she wrote the pulse record and the prescription, she handed him the prescription and said, "Go ahead and get the medicine in the imperial physician's office. There are medicine jars in it, and there are students from the imperial physician's office. They will tell you how to do it. You can think about it, come back to me after drinking the medicine, and if you decide to go back to your hometown, I will give you the medicine." The man stretched out his hand to take the prescription, his lips trembled, but he still didn't say anything. He turned around and went to see his wife in the tent, and then went to the imperial physician's office to get the medicine and boil it. The brothers who came with him gathered together to discuss with him, "Brother, let's not talk about the money for medical treatment, it must be spent, but if you stay in the capital, what should you do with food and accommodation?" "Phew. Yes, I don't know how much it will cost to rent a house in the capital. There is also money to eat." The man understood what they meant. This is to let him take the prescription and go home to cure it, as long as he can save his life. Before he came, he had thought about it. If he didn't ask for anything else, he just asked to save his life. The child was still young, so he couldn't live without his mother, and he couldn't live without his daughter-in-law. But since there is a possibility of getting better now, it is as good as it was a few months ago. The man squatted in front of the medicine stove and held his head without speaking. Man Bao has continued to see a doctor. A man in his 30s is holding a woman in his hand. The two of them are sitting in front of Man Bao together. Facing her, he was a little uneasy, but Nyanyo said, "Zhou Xiaoshen doctor, you can see if I can have a child." Man Bao looked at the couple who wanted to bury their heads in their chests and smiled, "I'll see your tongue coating." When the two finally raised their heads, Man Bao took a careful look at their faces, motioned Shi Xiu and Lu Sunyang to pay attention to, then felt their pulse and asked some questions. The two of them were too nervous, stumblingly answered, and their voices were very low, not to mention Zhou Liru and others standing behind Man Bao. Even Shi Xiu and Lu Sunyang who were sitting next to her could hardly hear them. See you at 6 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2028. Because they were too embarrassed, Man Bao didn't ask Shi Xiu and Lu Sunyang to ask them any more questions, but let them feel their pulse, and then she wrote the pulse case on the side, and after they read it, she would join the couple. His wife said, "You don't have a big problem, but if you want to have a child, you'd better take medicine to recuperate. I'll prescribe a month's medicine for you. After taking the medicine, pay more attention to your body, and usually eat some meat or eggs. Slowly get your body back to work." He said to her husband again, "If you have some questions, I will prescribe medicine for you, take it for half a month to see the situation, and after half a month." She frowned and thought for a while, "You can go to Ji Shitang in Xiangziu in half a month. It's best to go in the morning. I'll take a look and give you a new prescription." The man became excited, "That means my disease can be cured." Man Bao thought for a while and said, "It can be cured if it can be cured, but things like children also depend on fate, so both of you and your wife should take medicine and take care of your body. When fate comes, the child will come naturally." The imperial doctor sitting next door couldn't help nodding secretly. Imperial Dr. Zhou was also very good at talking now, so things like fate naturally depend on fate. Man Bao prescribed medicine for the two of them, and warned some precautions, such as women should try not to touch cold water, and men should not eat anything. The two of them took it down seriously, and then took the prescription and left with great gratitude. They kept seeing that at noon, the chef of the imperial physician's office had prepared lunch, and they went to rest. The people waiting in line also took out their dry food to eat. Some families were relatively wealthy, and they directly asked people to go to the nearby stalls to buy some food. The more affluent people did not have to line up by themselves, but let them go. The next person came to the line, and they sat and waited in a nearby tea house. In fact, it is possible to pay for a position, but firstly, the guards who maintain the order are not allowed, and secondly, it is rare for the people to encounter free consultations with imperial physicians, and even if someone lacks money, they will not sell the position. The imperial physicians said that they would sit for 4 days, but who knows if the imperial physicians will see it later, or let the students see it directly. So no one is willing to give up the position of the first day. If you can see it, you have already earned it. The imperial physicians led the students back to the imperial physician's office for dinner. The students ran to the cafeteria early to mingle with other students, while Zhenggu and the other 12 stayed by the side and listened to the gentlemen quietly. Imperial physician Lu asked Man Bao, "I heard that you treated a seriously ill person in the morning." Man Bao nodded and opened her food box. There were very few pieces of meat. Pickles and cabbage accounted for most of them. She was used to it. Man Bao picked up a steamed bun and briefly explained the patient's pulse. Fang Tai on the side said, "Such a disease requires at least 3 months of medicine, and the average family is afraid that it will not be able to support it. More than 3 months, it's only life-saving." If you want to get better, you need to take medicine for at least half a year, another imperial doctor said, otherwise, you will have to lie in bed for the rest of your life. Man Bao knew in his heart that, just like her mother before, she might even have to lean against the wall to walk steadily. After eating a mouthful of steamed buns, Man Bao said, she is a new disease, not a scab. With acupuncture, it will be almost 3 months. But Zhou Tai's acupuncture skills are not available to everyone. If he leaves the capital, no one will be able to use acupuncture to treat him. Quanta Hospital knows that although Zhou Man is not easy to bully, she is very kind-hearted as a doctor. When encountering such a patient, she will definitely provide convenience. Man Bao also nodded, then looked at the lively students over there, and sighed, so we have to teach them quickly and send them to local medical offices, so that such a disease does not have to travel thousands of miles to the capital. Find someone. All the imperial physicians, so you have to teach so many people the skill of housekeeping. There was a move in the heart of the imperial physician, and he thoughtfully said, I wonder if you can ask the acupuncture method used by the imperial physician Zhou. Man Bao nodded and said, no problem, we can discuss it later. The imperial physicians were delighted, since she was so generous, others were not stingy, and simply said, after lunch, we might as well go out for a walk, and also take a look at the patient of the imperial physician Zhou. I have some experience in nourishing qi and blood, I can't say that the recipe in my hand is more suitable for her. Man Bao couldn't ask for anything, so he immediately responded and accelerated the pace of eating. The patient in the tent took the medicine and lay down, then the curtain was lifted, and then an imperial doctor in official uniform came in. Man Bao walked at the front and nodded to the man standing cramped, I'll bring other imperial physicians to have a look. Then he turned his head and said to his colleagues, she is still suffering from a cold, but fortunately it is not severe. I prescribed medicine to drive her away from the cold, but she must be careful not to blow the wind, otherwise it will cause an accident. The imperial physicians expressed their understanding. Now is the time when she needs it the most. At this time, it is easy for the evil wind to enter the body. It is also miraculous that there is no wind chill in Beijing. The 5 imperial physicians stepped forward to feel the pulse one by one, and after discussing it in a low voice, they prescribed 2 prescriptions to Zhou Man. They may not need this prescription, but this one is good, the imperial physician Zhou will take a look. Man Bao differentiated with them, and found that it was true, they had 4 herbs that were much better than her. So Man Bao calculated in his heart and immediately decided to change the prescription. After they had seen all of them, Man Bao sent them out of the tent, and then brought Shi Xiu and Lu Sunyang back and asked the woman's husband, have you made up your mind? The man had already decided to go home for treatment, because this time he went out to collect a lot of money. If he stayed in the capital, he might not be able to buy medicine for half a month. Relatives borrowed some, which should be enough for 4 months. But when he saw that Zhou Man had led so many imperial doctors to see his wife, the unwillingness in his heart came out again, he turned his head and glanced at his silent wife lying on the bed, and finally gritted his teeth and said, Emperor Zhou, we stay. His younger brothers were taken aback, big brother. He said, you can't let your sister-in-law lie in bed for the rest of your life. You go back first, and your sister-in-law and I stay, and you will come to pick us up in 3 months. Man Bao, it's good to find a caravan at that time, and you can help people with some work. It won't cost you much money to go to Fengzhou, at least it will save money than your brother coming to the capital to pick you up and then go back. Seeing the woman crying quietly on the bed, she said to them, think of the good in everything, if you cure the person, she will always be able to work and manage the housework in the future, otherwise it will only be cured when she is lying on the bed, and you have to raising her for a lifetime. Doesn't she earn more money than she spends in the past 3 months? The younger brothers who had some opinions heard the words and pondered. See you at 9. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2029. When Manbao clicked, he turned around and said, "Since you have decided, just follow me to get the prescription." Manbao prescribed medicine for him and said, "She has to pierce the needles, first for 5 days, every afternoon for these 4 days, when the sun is at its highest, you can bring people over, don't have to queue, go directly into the tent, I will take the time to give it." They got needles. But you have to find a place to live. You have to keep warm. She can't blow the wind or catch the cold. It's definitely not possible to live in the temple of the city god or live in the firewood room of the inn as you thought before. Manbao said, "Find a place to live." The man looked embarrassed, but after hesitating, he nodded. Manbao smiled, pulled out another piece of paper and said, "This prescription was developed by the imperial physicians in our imperial hospital, and it is even better than the one I prescribed before. It may take less than 3 months to heal." She handed him the paper she had just written on her hand and said, "This is the address of my restaurant. I know you are not familiar with the capital when you first came here, so you can go to the restaurant to find my 5th brother, and ask him to help you find one for you. Place, 3 months, it is best to rent a room. I know you all have to spend money on medicine and food. I will ask my 5th brother to find some work for you, not necessarily, you don't take too big hope." The few people who had never thought about finding work in the capital opened the door to a world in an instant, and said in a daze, Can we still work in the capital?" Manbao said, "Why not?" When she first arrived in the capital, her 4 brothers and 5 brothers also did things like carrying bags, and now that Shai Zuolang is doing business, he has a lot of dealings with some merchants and caravans in the outer city. Looking for this kind of bag-carrying work is not difficult. "By the way, what's your name?" The man immediately grinned, "Master Hui, my surname is Luo, the eldest in the family. My name is not good, you can just call me Luo Dalan." Manbao nodded and waved, "You guys go." Luo Dalan held the paper and didn't move. He blushed and said, "Sir, I don't know how to read this address." Manbao smiled and said, "My restaurant is on Ronghe Street in the outer city. It's called Zhuji Restaurant. If you can't remember, you can ask the people in the store next to you with a piece of paper, and they will give you directions." People walking on the road are not necessarily literate, but the shopkeepers in the store must be literate. It is always right to ask them. When Luo Dalan heard it, he immediately responded, carefully folded the paper and put it into his arms to grab the medicine first. Manbao gave them 3 medicines. After he paid for the medicine, he carried his wife to the board again, and then lifted the board with his younger brothers and went to the outer city. Manbao had been busy all day, and everyone could put up signs to stop work until the sun went down. The students and officers moved the tables, chairs, and benches to the imperial doctor's office. Imperial Dr. Lu stretched his waist and rubbed his hand again, sighing, I'm getting old, I can't keep up with you." Everyone smiled and joined the ranks of old one after another. Manbao silently did not speak. Fang Tai suggested, "I'll have to eat when I go back now, why don't we go to Qinji to have a mutton soup? The cold wind that has been blowing all day is good to eat something warm." Manbao became more silent. She put away the medicine box and said goodbye to everyone after a sigh, "Dr. Lu, Imperial Dr. Xiao, I'll go back to the palace first." The imperial physician said goodbye to her with a smile, go back, the Tianhe Palace gate will be closed in a while." Imperial physician Lu also greeted her, "It is Imperial physician Zheng who is on duty tonight, you should be more alert. If something happens, I may ask you." Because of the free clinic, Imperial physician Zheng had to watch the night shift alone. He was on the wheel after going back to sleep in the afternoon. Tomorrow, Imperial Physician Xiao will be on duty during the day shift, and Imperial Physician Fang will be on duty at night. Man Bao's turn was the night shift on the last day, and he only came for half a day that day. Man Bao sighed and got into the car to return to the palace. By the time she walked back to the Chongguan Hall from the gate of the palace, it was going to be dark. Bai Shan was still reading, the lamp was lit in the library, and as soon as Man Bao returned to the Chongguan Hall, a servant came to report, "Master, Zhou Xiao-sama is back." "Already?" Bai Shan raised his head from the book, and after a while, he got up and put the book away. After turning off the light, he went out with the waiter. Man Bao strolled over with a medicine box. Bai Shan was waiting there with a book, and couldn't help laughing. "Aren't you hungry?" Man Bao walked over leisurely. "I'm too hungry, I don't feel anything now, I think the palace is quiet at the moment." Bai Shan took her hand and squeezed it. "You can still enjoy the scenery when you are frozen like this." Bai Shan took the medicine box in her hand and pulled her away. "Let's go, I have someone go to the kitchen to get something for you to stew. Your food is still hot on the stove, eat it first things back home." Man Bao followed him to their yard. Unlike the quietness of the yard where she lived, it was lively before the locks. The lights were bright, most of the room doors were open, and everyone gathered together in twos and threes. When Man Bao and the others entered the door, the room in the middle didn't know what to say. "Happy." When Zhao Liaolang was laughing up to the sky, he caught sight of Zhou Man coming in, and he squeaked and whistled boldly. Man Bao sighed when he heard it, turned his head and asked Bai Shan, "Did you blow?" Bai Shan's face darkened, "No." Man Bao glanced at Zhao Liaolang in the room and said, "I don't know if his whistle-blowing skills are the same as the sixth brother's. I don't know if they can learn it." Everyone was waiting for Zhou Man to be embarrassed, but Zhou Man just glanced at the room and left. Zhao Liaolang raised his eyebrows, turned his head and asked his companions, "She didn't even rush in and beat me. Are you cheap? You know she can't mess with her, but you mess with her." Man Bao followed Bai Shan into the room, smelled a scent as soon as he entered, and then saw Bai Erlang and Yin or others sitting at the table. As soon as the two came in, Bai Erlang immediately dropped the book in his hand. "You finally came back, but I don't know how much torture we suffered." "What tortured you?" Bai Erlang said, "You hear it?" Man Bao had already smelled it. There were 3 stoves in the corner of the house, and each stove had an urn. One of them was bubbling softly, and the aroma kept wafting out from there. Man Bao stepped forward and squatted down, wrapping the cloth and opening the lid. She couldn't help but be surprised. "Where did you get the ribs and lotus root?" Bai Shan smiled and said, "I bought it with money and the kitchen." In the palace, as long as there is money, most things can be bought. Feng Zongping and the others also put down their books and said to her, "After dinner, Bai Shan saw that you didn't come back, so he asked someone to go to the kitchen to buy an urn." The kitchen not only chopped the meat, but also chopped the lotus root. "The ingredients are all set, and you can boil it with water. Because I don't know when you will come back, I want to give you a hot meal, so I borrowed a stove from us. Your food is always hot." The stove was simmering all the time, and we were suffering from the smell here. See you tomorrow. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2030. There was a table of people eating together, and Man Bao asked Feng Zongping, "Why don't you go to the library to read?" "I think the smell here is too good. Can I go to the bookstore?" "Why don't Bai Shan go?" Bai Erlang said, "It's too cold, and you think he's really serious about studying? He's waiting for you in the front." Bai Shan said, "I can't stop your mouth from eating. Are you having a late night snack? Eat less." Man Bao immediately nodded, "Eating too much and getting fat, think about King Gong." Bai Erlang felt that the lotus root pork rib soup that had just been served was not so fragrant. Bai Shan turned his head and asked her, "How is your free clinic today?" "It's all right, there are quite a lot of people here, but there are several serious illnesses, so the diagnosis is a little slower, knowing that it was the imperial doctors from the Thai hospital who brought the students for free clinics. Everyone automatically ignored the word student at the back. Wealthy people usually don't get a doctor, and there are patients in the family who also come to see it, so there are many people. There are also a lot of critically ill patients. Not to mention that Man Bao has seen 2 patients who were carried by wooden boards today. Other imperial doctors have also seen several critically ill patients, especially Imperial Physician Xiao and Imperial Physician Lu. The critically ill patients they received today are together 5. After all, one is the front yard and the other is the modern rationale. The medical skills are recognized as the best in the Taiyuan hospital. Speaking of the patient Man Bao, she thought of Luo Dalan. She briefly mentioned the situation of Luo Dalan and his wife, and then said, "I asked 5th brother to find work for them, and I don't know if I can find it." "It should be possible," Bai Shan said. "Now the 5th brother is quite familiar with that area." Wu Wulang didn't find a job for them, but found them a place to live. There are many courtyards in the outer city that are specially rented. In the case of Luo Dalan and the others, it is much cheaper to find a courtyard and rent 2 rooms than an inn. So after Wu Wulang saw Man Bao's note, he took them through the streets and finally chose a yard. But Luo Dalan and the others did not book 2 rooms, but only 1 room after seeing 10 people living in the next room. When you are away from home, you can save money. At noon the next day, after he boiled the medicine and fed it to his wife, he and his brothers carried the person to the imperial physician's office. Man Bao gave her a needle while she was eating. Today, she admitted another critically ill patient, and she was also a person who couldn't get sick and could only carry it. Therefore, a new wooden bed was added to the tent. Because the household is stingy, there is not even a curtain. Fortunately, they are all women, so there is no need to be particularly cautious. The woman lying on the other side of the bed disliked the quilt on her body, and whispered, "There won't be lice, right?" The family background can be seen from the quilt on the other side. Ms. Luo turned her head slightly embarrassed, and pulled the quilt on her body to prevent it from falling too much on her side. Ms. Luo heard it, and of course Man Bao, who was teaching Lu Sunyang how to pierce a needle in a low voice, also heard it. She looked up at the other party and said, "There will be no lice this day, don't worry." The woman was a little embarrassed when she heard the words. She was older, and her granddaughter was older than Zhou Man, so she replied. She was a little embarrassed and dissatisfied, but because she was an imperial doctor, she didn't dare to say anything, just secretly glancing at Ms. Luo. After Man Bao told Lu Sunyang, he stepped forward and stood between the 2 of them. Unfortunately, it happened to block her sight. She nodded slightly to Lu Sunyang, "Come on, you can try it." Yes, Lu Sunyang stepped forward and untied Ms. Luo's clothes, pinched the needle and followed the acupuncture method taught by the master. Man Bao pointed from time to time. The effect of the needle is also related to the smoothness of the needle. It's not that the acupoints are pinned correctly, the needles are twisted correctly, the air is in the acupoints. If your administration is smooth, the airflow will also be smooth, so it must be smooth, not stagnant. This is all learned from the beginning, and Man Bao is just emphasizing one more sentence at this time. The master and the apprentice taught each other, and the time passed quickly. When Ms. Luo finished her needlework, the 2 helped her get dressed, and then called Luo Dalan in. "Okay, take him back, pay attention to keep warm, take medicine on time, and don't be too simplistic about what to eat. You can buy some meat and cook porridge for her to eat, or you can eat eggs." She said, "It's important to take medicine, but it's also important to eat food. The ingredients can be used, not only to strengthen the body, but also to be non-toxic, so you have to let her eat well." Luo Dalan listened carefully, then nodded again and again, and after he thanked Zhou Man, he carried the person out. Man Bao sent them away, turned around and took Lu Sunyang to see the newly admitted patient. She suffered from stroke and hemiplegia, but only the left half of her body was not conscious much, so her words didn't affect her much. Man Bao felt that this case was good, and it was suitable for both men and women, so he turned to Lu Sunyang and said, "Go and call Shi Xiu in to study together, and Zhou Liru and the others, let them come in to study." Lu Sunyang responded, so she went out, and a group of people came in after a while. "Old woman." Shi Xiu had already touched her pulse outside just now, so Man Bao did not let him continue to check her pulse, but picked up her left hand, released it, and said, "See, the left hand is weak, and once it is released, there is a more accurate way of judging whether it can be recovered if it falls on the bed." The old woman opened her mouth, her face flushed red. Man Bao is the doctor, and the first thing to do is to observe words and expressions. She immediately stopped teaching when she saw this, and calmly said to her, "Don't worry, old lady, they are just here to see you." The old woman couldn't help but said angrily, "Then why didn't you come in to see when you were treating the purpuritum just now?" Man Bao smiled and said, "That's the needle. There are male students here. The patient doesn't want to, and we won't force it. The old lady is only asking for a consultation. The male students will also go out when the needle is inserted." She said, "Don't worry, they won't be abusive to you." One student couldn't help muttering, "This free clinic is for me to wait for my studies. I don't even want to see it. What to study?" When the old woman heard this, her nose was so angry that she was about to scold her. Man Bao hastily apologized, "The student is ignorant. It's my fault for waiting for my husband. We will punish him when we go back. Don't be angry, old lady." But the old woman still scolded out loudly. Man Bao sighed, no longer persuaded her, and let her scold. After she finished scolding, she apologized again, and then led the students out, and let the family members of the patients go in to accompany her. She led these students into the imperial physician's office and spoke directly from the side, "Shi Xiu, talk about it." "Shi Xiu, we shouldn't speak rudely and anger the patient." "That's true, but I'm asking about the patient's condition. Didn't you look at her face when she scolded someone just now?" Her left finger shook a little. "All students, so the teacher asked them to see a doctor while scolding?" Man Bao frowned slightly and looked at Lu Sunyang, "Tell me. See you at 8 p.m.